of Okeechobee Utility Authority for February 11th, 2019. Can I get everybody to please stand and join me in the pledge to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next, we're going to have the determination of voting members. Melanie Anderson?
Present.
Okay. Tommy Clay? Here. Griesman is here. Jeff Fagley? Present. Harry Moldenhauer? Here. Michael Myers will not be here. Steve Nelson?
Present.
Derek Tremaine. So we do have a quorum. Like Steve, Tommy, John, and Melanie will be voting, correct, sir?
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Yes, sir.
Agenda item number 2 is the meeting minutes from January 14th, 2019. Any errors or omissions?
I make a motion we accept as written.
Motion, Mr. Clay.
Second.
Second, Mr. Nelson. Discussion? Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Agenda item number 3, our consent agenda.
Motion to accept the consent agenda as written.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Nelson, second by Mr. Clay. Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Skipping all the way down to agenda item 9, the potential exhaustion of SRF number 2. Either John or George.
Okay, what you have in front of you is a proposed repayment in full of SRF number 2, which currently has an interest rate of 2.3%. As you'll see that the total payoff is $2,985,000. Money that's already allocated to that on a regular basis is $79,661. We still have the land sales money from about a year ago of $1,871,250. We have operating funds that are in the same account as the land sales account. That's $150,000. And then we have operating reserve fund of $883,000, and that would pay off the SRF number 2 in full. Any questions?
Yes, what is the payment on this a year?
Yearly payment? $318,644.
I know that at our last meeting, the board showed interest in paying off SRF2 with the trying to get our debt load or annual debt service down, and this was one way to do it. And ask for this information that you presented us. Thank you for bringing this back to us. My only concern is these reserve funds were burning up. We, after our land sales, we really are limited on reserves, and we're looking at pulling $883,000 out of reserves at $316,000 a year. That's going to take 2.7 years to pay back, to build our reserve back up. So that's just one thing that concerns me. If we have a catastrophic event and we're out of reserves, what are we going to do? That concerns me as a business person.
We have 3 types of reserves. We have the renewal and replacement improvement reserve. That's roughly $500,000. Then we have an emergency reserve fund, which is about $625,000. So that's $1,125,000 approximately. And then you have this operating reserve fund, which is about $1,009,000 in total. So we'd be spending that down to about $1,001,000. So even after we would spend it down, we'd still have about $2.7 million in reserves available.
Yeah, my deal was, and I'm sorry I overlooked that you put that in here at $318,000, but I think this all fits in with the southwest section is the way I was anticipating paying this off in case we do not get any funding, that this 318,000, if we have to do, when we do the next loan, if we do the southwest section, we're already we're accustomed to making that $318,000 payment. So if we had to do half that payment's probably going to be close to what we're paying off. And that's what I'm looking at, is how to do this without harming, if we don't get any money. I mean, if we had to make another $318,000 or $350,000 payment on Southwest Section Phase 1, that we could do that without hurting ourselves.
Board also has one other minor consideration, and again, this is very, very minor. The interest we're paying on this SRF loan is around 2.3%. The amount of interest we're earning on our deposits is a shade over 1%. So again, it's a very, very minor consideration. I understand that once we spend it, we don't have it, but there is that also slight advantage to paying off the debt that's coming in at a higher interest rate than what we're earning in T-bills or savings account or whatever. It's a minor consideration, but it still merits worth saying.
Yeah, I understand that, and I know to move forward with the southwest section, that is definitely something we need to do. It just concerns me a little bit when I see an operating revenue fund, we're pulling $883,000 out of that, and then our land surplus we had of $1.8 million, we're burning that up too. So I was just concerned about having some reserve, but Mr. Gall he explained that to me.
Yeah, and it's well noted that, yes, we don't have that money once we spend it. If there is a need, it won't be there. But by the same token, the comfort is that we're saving $318,000 a year in annual expenses that we don't have to account for both this year, which will give us a surplus to a certain extent, and every year thereafter.
The board have any further questions or opinions?
I just wanted to ask when it's pushed. I just wanted to ask when we normally make this debt payment. Is it the beginning of the year, before?
We normally make it twice a year, once March 15th, and the other time is September 15th.
Okay. I would like to suggest that maybe we hold off on this, pay the March payment, see what's coming down the pike, because we have some other things we aren't sure about. That would give us a couple of 3 more months to address it, and then if we decide to go with the payoff, then address it at that time.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Any further discussion?
Is the number that we're using here, this 883, is that coming out of unrestricted funds? Or is that coming out of one of these other categories?
It would be coming out of the restricted asset category. If the board would like, I could talk you through our $15 million of cash. I'll do that. We have, as of January 31st, we have $15.3 million in cash. Of that, $5.9 million is appropriated for CIP projects, but we won't spend that money for probably the next 18 months to two years in full. So after you put the money for the CIP projects, you still have $9,350,000 left. Out of that $9,350,000, there's $2,000,001 designated for capital expenditure in the capital expenditure budget for this year. So after you spend that money, there's still $7,250,000 available. And then out of the $7,250,000, there's $5,300,000 that's restricted cash balances. So we end up with a $1,966,000 that's unrestricted, not appropriated. And again, some of the money I've just talked about, it won't be spent for 2 years.
Part of it's for the tank and everything else that we got coming up. So, yeah, so it's money that's going to be there until we get all these projects done.
Yes,
Correct.
that's correct.
The payment, is it a 50/50 payment on the 318? Is that you pay half and half?
Yeah, it's $159 each 6 months, basically.
I respect Miss Melanie and what she's thinking, and I understand that we're looking at these projects that going forward, I know there's a bunch of wind blowing on the coast with this new governor and Mr. Mast and what they're going to do and what they're telling everybody, but I think as we go forward, we've got a project on the table that we can do without anybody's help. We would love to have help, but we can do it without everybody's help. And that's what I'm pushing for, is to get, I don't want to get caught up in the political wind of this mess that everybody's throwing at us. I want to continue to stay focused. If we do this project, it can be phase one of the project going to Okie-Tanny. So there's all kind of things we can do here, but that's the reason I was pushing to pay it off.
Further discussion? I concur with you, Tommy. I really do. I agree totally with what you're saying. Well, want to make a motion in a second and then vote on it?
I make a motion that we pay off SRF2 and from the reserves as written.
Motion, Mr. Clay.
Second.
Second, Mr. Nelson. Further discussion? Further discussion?
I just want to say, it wasn't a preference, it was just a suggestion that I was making.
Further discussion? Being none. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Sorry. Agenda item number 10, delinquent accounts.
I was asking another question. Number 10, these are, all right, I get it. Sorry, number 10, delinquent accounts. As the board package describes, that over time, a long time, there have been upwards of 1,161 accounts for one reason or another that have entered a delinquent status or uncollectible status. Your board package defines how those accounts could be attributed to a category being an owner account, a tenant account, or other non-revenue account, utility revenue account under the business category. Those owner accounts could be on residential or non-residential properties. The tenant accounts, same deal. They could be either under residential or non-residential, basically renters. And the business accounts are associated with some kind of business debt. They may have damaged OUA infrastructure. They may not have paid for services rendered. However that category came up. There has been attempts in the past to try to collect some of this debt, but for whatever reason it is still on the books. The table that's just below that is the breakout of those accounts under the owner, tenant, and business accounts. And you can see there's a shade over $338,000 involved in these accounts. That being said, we go back and look at the accounts, and due to the age of some of them, There are issues that have come up as far as factors in consideration of recovery. The first one that's described here is service agreements. Again, service agreements were not in effect when the OUA was created. This is something that's kind of evolved through time, contractual arrangement, if you will, between the person receiving the goods and services and the OUA. The service agreement clearly describes who's doing what and who's responsible for those services. General account documentation. Again, we have the issue ongoing of owners providing warranty deeds, the sale of properties, records not being kept up. So there can be account documentation as to who's on the account, who incurred the debt, how it was arrived at. It's one of those administrative functions that is always ongoing. Specific account information, what created the debt, was it an issue of non-service payment, how was it, how much was it, who incurred it. Again, it's one of those type of deals to clearly identify who is the owner of the debt. And then we go through the computer software. We've had some upgrades to the Springbrook software, which when it was upgraded, it just provided totals of certain accounts, not the detail. It was one of those things that, as anybody can imagine, when you go through computer upgrades, you don't always catch those elements within the upgrade as to what has happened. Florida statutes, they're defined there between the lien status of a property versus the debt, whether it was under contract or not, and that recoverable period or statutory limitations, if you want to use that term, of those accounts. And then, of course, last but not least, the valuation of the debt, where we're at with that. If the debt's $25, what is the cost of recovery? If the cost of the debt is $2,500, what is the cost of recovery and the return on that recovery effort? So then we get down to the actual owner debt, tenant, and business. Staff has looked at the original 407 accounts under the owner status, and looking at those, what we would like to be able to do is to get that 1,161 numbered accounts down to a manageable number. That was the intent. So when we looked at the owner accounts, we have tabulated in the accounts that are there in your board package upwards of 155 accounts totaling $33,801.19 that could be considered for write-off this morning. On the tenant accounts, same type of deal. We looked at the total number of accounts being 728. In review of those, we're recommending this morning that 394 accounts that, again, are included in your board package at a total of $75,294.61 would be up for consideration of write-off this morning. Under the business accounts, again, looking at the total 26 accounts, there was 11 of them that met this criteria that we were using, totaling $39,864.20. That we would recommend consideration of write-off this morning, totaling the $148,960.20.
John, just out of curiosity, how does someone like South Florida Boring run up a $16,000 bill? Is it because they damaged something or what?
We sued on that. We brought a suit against that company, and guess what? It wound up being worse. We were throwing good money out the back. So, we should have written it all on top of it.
The answer to your question is yes, they bored right through one of our gravity sewer. How they went that deep, why they bored through our pipe, we had no idea until, of course, there became a blockage and a problem within the road, and then we had to dig it up. It's over there by the Burger King, heading down that road, where we had pictures of it being physically marked. There's 2 manholes in the road. They should have known there was a pipe there. They went real deep. I guess they were hoping it would be underneath us, and they went right through our pipe.
Are they still in business?
My understanding, they are out of business. That's why we can't collect.
I was just going to suggest we never use them.
So the deal is, after we get through with these accounts, which are the, I want to say, easier ones that we can look at that we eliminate, we would be bringing the remaining portion of these accounts back to the board for consideration, whether we go into a letter writing campaign, phone call, collection agency, but we have a better feeling for those remaining 600 accounts that we can come back and actually pursue collection means, which it's an ongoing process. We make phone calls, we send out letters, we are getting some response through that action, but we would pursue these 600. And at the end of the day, we will also be bringing up a refined Policy and Procedures Act to explain what we're going to be doing in the future, how we address these things before they get 10, 11 years old, 12 years old.
Well, my only concern is someone like Shelter and Son out of Indiantown. If we write this off and then they come back over here to do something, we don't have anything to go back against them, do we?
We just have a long memory. Well, I felt that way about the Harvard law. But I agree, they always cleaned it up, they'll be written off. I carry them on books, there's going to be no one ever recovered. And statute of limitations on the playoffs.
So your suggestion is to write all this off?
So the recommendation is to write off 560 accounts, which would leave us 601, more manageable of a number, and that's the action you're looking for today?
Yes, sir.
So said.
Okay.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Clay, second, Mr. Nelson. Further discussion? Discussion being none, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
So just for advisement, we will be bringing back the 600, again, with a policy and procedure, how we're going to move forward with it in the future.
Agenda item number 11, surface water treatment plant water storage tank.
Mr. Chairman and board members, you have in your board package, as well as handed out today, a couple items concerning the ground storage tank at the surface water treatment plant. We, as the board package indicates, on January 29th, the OUA did receive sealed bids and conducted a bid opening. Eckler Engineers managed that bid opening, and you see in your board package a review of those bids. We did receive 7 bids, with R.J. Sullivan Corporation submitting the lowest, what would appear to be the lowest, most responsive bid of $5,095,000. How did that compare? In your handouts at your place settings today, you can see what the engineer's pre-bid cost estimate totaled, almost $5.3 million. And also at your place setting is the bid form utilized by R.J. Sullivan in submitting their bid to get to that $5,095,000. Below that is the total project cost, which would include both the construction estimate as well as any other expenses that we could throw in with that, both engineering, design, construction. It totals a little over what we had budgeted for the coming 2 years, leaving a unbudgeted amount of $564,800. To put that in perspective, then what we would be able to do is there are monies within the operating accounts that could be used to make up this $564,800 difference. And that's what we're certainly looking at here today as presentation to you, that you could accept the award and authorize us to move forward with getting the contract agreement with the contractor, their bonds, insurance, and bring back at the next board meeting a signed agreement between the OUA and the potential contractor, R.J. Sullivan, for further review by the OUA board, which you could then issue the notice to proceed.
One question for Doug. Is this the company that Fred Covert works for?
I'm sorry?
Is this the company that our buddy Fred works for?
It is.
I thought it was, yes. Mutual acquaintance, and I worked with Fred over the years. He is local, and he's top-notch.
The company itself, both Fred and the company, it came highly regarded, as well as some of the other bidders. Wharton Smith built, where was in charge of our treatment plant expansion at the wastewater plant, and Cardinal Contractors did the expansion at the surface water plant. So there's a number of qualified bidders there, R.J. Sullivan being one of them.
So you need approval on R.J. Sullivan?
Yes, sir. They would be, after review of anything that you can see presented here, the engineer's recommendation of award, it would be up to the board, understanding the project elements, cost, what they've submitted in the bids, to authorize to move forward with a recommendation of award, which would then lead us to the next step, that the contractor would have to pull together their necessary insurance and pre-agreement documents and a signed contract, present that to the board at the next meeting, and that's when you would review all of that documentation, and if so inclined, to issue the notice to proceed.
Is this normal to see $1.4 million between the low bidder and the high bidder on a project this size, Doug?
The high bidder wasn't really interested in the project.
In another way of answering that question, two things that you don't want to have is to have the engineer below all the other bidders, or have one bidder that is considerably lower than all the rest, because one of the questions you're going to ask is, what did they miss, what did they leave out, and you enter into those kind of questions. So the short answer from staff's perspective is that the range isn't so much, but just that there is a tight group down near the bottom, which is what we have. I would ask you, if anybody was going to question, out of all these sealed bids, how do you have two bidders come in with the same exact number? That is the question that, if you're going to ask a question, what's the chances of that happening? But we did, and they were sealed bids, and they came in exactly the same. It's just kind of a strange deal. Well, they all are probably utilizing a lot of the same vendors, and they get the same pricing, so it's not surprising that it does happen. But when it does, it's like, man, that's weird, but it is what it is. The good thing is they both weren't the low bidder, so we didn't have to try to pick straws between the two.
They were almost the same exact name. Yeah.
Reading all that, Florida Design. So what do we need to do? We need to make a recommendation of award to R.J. Sullivan Corporation.
Number one, you're accepting the recommendation from the engineer, and you're accepting the bids submitted by RJ, and you're authorizing the executive director to issue a notice of award. I'll take that action first, and then I'll do the transfer of funds.
Sounds good. So said.
I wouldn't try to repeat that.
Second.
Motion by Mr.
Second by Mr. Nelson. Further discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now, the second part will be the authorization of the transfer of funds.
The $564,000?
Yeah.
All right, I make a motion that we do as staff recommends on moving the $564,800.
Second.
Second, Mr. Nelson. Discussion? Any discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Can't take it with you.
All right, agenda item number 12.
Can we skip this one?
Wastewater project, 2019.
Mr. Chairman and board
Why
members.
is this back?
It's back again, and as you may be aware, there was some discussion at the last BOCC meeting where there was a question brought up as to why Treasure Island is not a higher priority than some of the other projects. Clearly, you know, what has been presented before by the OUA board, that the Southwest Wastewater Service Area is the number one project for the reasons so stated, such as potential public health threat, number of customers, septic to sewer, possibility of water quality improvements. All of those things have been discussed at length in the past. The added benefit that the OUA board certainly considered is that the Okatani project, if it were to happen with the signed contract that is yet to be signed, but it's supposed to be signed, that the construction of the Southwest project would take care of the northern segment of that Okatani project. So it kind of piggybacks onto it. So at your last board meeting, the OUA board did elect to add the Okatani project as a fourth consideration of a project to the legislative delegation. That's where it was left at. I can tell you that that other folks now have started bringing up the Treasure Island septic to sewer project, because that might be one of the hot topic items that Tallahassee is under for improved water quality due to the elimination of septic tanks. It's back on the agenda today just to see if what has transpired over the last few weeks, whether locally, statewide, wherever, whether the board wanted to look at that and take anything under consideration and change their priorities. From a staff perspective, clearly what we need to have is that whomever is talking OUA projects to whatever level is that we're all on the same page with the same priority projects and not have a different viewpoint. I will only say it from my perspective and my perspective only. If there is a difference, you know, the option might be that a workshop of some sort for all parties where they can lay it out there might be open for discussion. Otherwise, we have this discussion this morning, and we do have a presentation scheduled for this Thursday with the BOCC. Has anything changed from an OUA board perspective? And that's the direction that both myself and the chairman need to be able to present to the BOCC on Thursday.
Well, I've met with one of the commissioners, and there's a rumor out there. Of course, everybody knows this governor and his staff's got everything in an uproar. And there's a rumor out there that they're willing to do $25 million projects. That's what I heard confidentially. But I also heard in two different places this weekend and last weekend that Brian Mast doesn't care if Lake Okeechobee dries up and blows away. So that being said, it's kind of hard for me to change what we're doing. We're moving forward with a project that we can do. And if we go back and we continue to move forward with this, but we say that this over here is our wish list, but we're doing this over here. I think if you add these two together, the Southwest Service Center, and even if you have to take out Phase 2 and make Phase 2 Okatani, like John's got it laid out here, you still get the $25 million project. But you also still, if you look at the numbers, you're still pulling tons of phosphorus and the load off the lake. You're pulling sewage treatment plants or the package plants and all off. So this all turning into a political wind, and I hate to keep saying that, but I think we have to stay focused on what we're doing. I would love for Treasure Island to be funded, but for us to go say we want Treasure Island, but we've just signed a deal to work on Southwest section, I think that sends a wrong signal. And I don't want to stop with the Southwest section. I want to continue to do something we know we can do with growth.
I agree with you Tommy. This southwest section is the backbone to any development that could happen at further down towards the river. You're looking at $35 million. And look at the potential customers, number one. 24 over in Treasure Island. We've got 750 roughly in the southwest section, and then from the river up another 500. So we're looking at 1,200 potential customers, and taking that amount off of package plants, septic tanks. So the environmental impact is just as big here as it is in Treasure Island. One thing that scares me is several years ago, this board, or the board at the time, focused on Treasure Island to the point that they put about $200 million in engineering. I mean, $2 million in engineering. And, sorry, John, I'm still dreaming big.
I can't get any money.
And the project was shelved. For some reason or another, special interests got involved, politics got involved, whatever it was shelved. Last year, we went after it again, a $24 million project. We got from DEP $530,000, and that was for construction. Once again, doesn't help us in the engineering and the design and everything we need. What's to say if we don't focus on that again this year, something doesn't happen like it again? I'm gun shy of Treasure Island right now. Is it important? Absolutely, it's important. Am I against the project? Not at all. But let's do the doable projects that's going to benefit Okeechobee. Get the force main in, and then we can branch off of there. So I'm not in a position right now to change my opinion from where it was.
I just feel that this may be the year for Treasure Island, because that's the way the winds are blowing. And everybody sees Treasure Island as being totally on the water and having a bigger effect. And your addition is a little bit off on your numbers. If you add up the total phosphorus and nitrogen, we're only at about 2/3 for the whole Southwest project, Okatani, is what you'd get out of Treasure Island. I think it's worth sitting down and doing a workshop with the commission to make sure we're all on the same page, because there are some valid arguments on the other side. And even if we have to postpone the Southwest, but there is a good argument for the Southwest in that without the Southwest, it doubles the cost of Okatani. And if they're going to want us to run something to Okatani, then we're not going to have the money for that right off the bat if we do Treasure Island. So, but I think it's worth sitting down and talking to them, having a workshop.
One more thing I wanted to bring up is last year we did get the $530,000 for Treasure Island construction. With the support of with Senator Grimsley, Representative Pigman, the Board of County Commissioners, and so on and so on and so on, we got that money transferred over to the Southwest section and split up where we can do design and construction. So it'd be impractical to move that money back. We're already concertedly working in the right direction. I think we need to continue working that direction.
Yeah, the Treasure Island deal needs to happen, but we can't fund it. And the last funding was $4 million is what we were going to get from Department of Ag, I think it was, wasn't it?
It was somewhere around that area. From the USDA was around $4 to $5 million. It was about 20% of the estimated project.
And when Mr. Geithner come in and we did all those numbers, the interest rate that we were paying back on the SRF loan to do that wiped out the 4 point whatever million it was they give us. So they really wasn't giving us anything. At the end of the day, we looked at it, and it was something we couldn't make work without raising the rates on everybody in the community. And that was going on when I got on this board 7 years ago. There's been $2 million spent on it, and all of a sudden we've got a new governor and we want to stop what we're doing. And the way that this board has been run has been very smart, I think. I think we've done a good job at paying these things down. We've been real practical with doing You know, we know we've got to build the new tank. We've done everything I think we're supposed to do. And we're looking at sustainable growth that's not going to harm us if we don't get any money. I agree with you that we need to do Okeechobee, but I just don't know where this governor, you know, nobody knows where this governor's at. And nobody really knows where Mast is at. And I'm a Republican, so I'm very concerned with what I see out of our Republican staff. And maybe I'll get kicked out of here for saying that, but that's the truth.
Again, this is only what we're doing right here, this topic of discussion, to either reaffirm the Southwest as being our priority project with the understanding that other partners in this, specifically, would like a do-over, if you will, of those priorities, and just to make it aware that, you know, their position. So we can keep it the way it is with the priorities, even as we have them listed here on this page, if you want. But that's just why we were bringing it out today, that we did have this chance prior to Thursday to have this open discussion as to where our priorities were going, whether there was a change or not, and that we could present this next Thursday to the in that meeting.
Okay, to keep it short, is there anybody on the panel that would like to even consider changing our rankings? Being none, I don't even think it's worth bringing to a vote.
I'd consider talking about it.
Well, of course. I've met with Commissioner Burrows, and the part of the roundtable discussion was not really of interest at this point. So we'll continue. But does anybody want to open it up to vote on changing our rankings?
No, because you're talking to one commissioner and I'm talking to another, and they're both on two different pages. And the one commissioner I'm talking to says that no matter what happens with Okeechobee, that eventually it's going to open back up, even if it's a county-run facility. So, which makes perfect sense to lay the line down there if they're going to do that. But also, the commissioner I'm talking to also said that he understood that they could be compromised on how we ranked them, but that was in his office. So we'll see what happens there.
Great discussion was that. You had some president in your audience for. No, you have to be a ping pong ball. Bounce back and forth. I agree with the practicality of doing something we economically can do. If we get the help to do trade off, absolutely. I mean, both of them are needed. Right. No way. But in a way, I resent the commission because they gave us the green light to go with the Southwest. And now we're questioning that decision. Again, I understand political wins. So I think the safe thing to do is to do the things most economically feasible. And what's best for our customers.
Well, I've had more than one person in the past, since we started this Southwest section, talking about watching when they get flooded out over where John lives, that they watch the bubbles come up out of their ground through their drain fields. That's leaking out. I don't care how you look at it. And if it's getting on top of the ground, it's getting in the ditch behind. So to me, it's more of a health thing than it is anything else. And if politics wants to kick me out of here for that, let them kick me out of here for that. But I think we got to go with what health is first.
We can't stop people visiting.
Yeah, I'm 2 times a year in the cinema. But
It does percolate, still goes to the ditches and ends up in the Rim Canal and the lake. It's got to go that way. So anyway, I'm inclined to just move on to agenda item number 13, if everybody's in agreement.
Yay. Mr. Chair, this is what we'll keep it in that same, is a preference same priority then? Southwest being the priority project and then followed by the others, whether that's Okeechobee, Treasure Island, or Pine Ridge Park.
We start with Southwest, Okeechobee, Pine Ridge, and
Thank you.
But, Mr. Chairman, when you're there telling them that, I would strongly suggest what we've talked about is there's the infrastructure for Okie County with the southwest section being done.
Agenda item number 13, deep well injection.
Mr. Chairman and board members, we are moving forward with this project. They have mobilized on site 3 or 4, well, they had 3 pumps there. They were talking about bringing in a 4th pump. The piping is in place. This morning as we speak, I think they are truing up the piping and putting the last of the instrumentation in place, and then we would start, we'd have a preliminary test just to confirm that they can pump upwards of 13,000 gallons a minute. Once that is proven that the pumps and the piping are in place, they would start the pre-testing, which is a lot of pre-readings before the test, water levels, pressures, that type of deal. And then once that is done, we'll spend the 20 hours doing the actual test, 5 hours each at those 4 flow rates, and then they spend 48 hours post-testing, the recovery period. So within a 8-9 day period, we should be done with this test and back to normal operations, followed up by a report, which we would make available to the OUA board at the end, and then submit that to the Water Management District.
For repayment.
Board package, sir. What you have in your board package here is the first pay request from the contractor in the amount of $10,000. Both the project manager, McNabb Hydrogeologic Consulting, as well as OUA staff have reviewed this and recommended for approval.
I would suggest that we follow staff's recommendation and pay the 10 grand. We're going to get it all back from water management anyway, right?
Yes, sir.
That's a motion, sir.
Motion by Mr. Clay to pay the $10,000.
Second.
Second, Mr. Nelson. Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Agenda item 14, proposed Glen Harvey WWTF.
Another one of these projects, and we'll try to get through the explanation here. Way back when a company got a state appropriation of $1 million to do a demonstration project for a small package treatment plant under a septic to sewer, if you will, basis. 2 areas we were supposed to do, Dade County or Okeechobee County, they came to us. We looked at a small package treatment plant that the OUA owned in a portion of Glades County, but it was in our service area, so it qualified, that being Lakeview Estates. Right next door to Lakeview Estates, there is a proposed project that's on the books for upwards of 500 lots. A question was raised as to whether or not, rather than rebuilding the Lakeview Estates treatment plant, what if we moved this demonstration project to this proposed development, eliminated the need for 80 houses on the phase 1 going on septic tank. They could join this package treatment plant, and we could pump the flow from Lakeview into the facility on Glen Harvey property. That's where we're at. That being said, it's going to require a significant amount of agreements between both the state of Florida and One Water, which they have given us. We have to have an agreement between the OUA and One Water, which they're in favor of doing the project, and the project developer is in favor of doing it. These are all verbal commitments at this time. We have to reduce those to contracts in writing. But before we were to move down that path, I wanted to bring this to the OUA board to see if that process of all these agreements, moving it from Lakeview to the Glen Harvey development project, bringing upwards of 80 to maybe eventually 500 lots, was doable for the OUA at this time to continue to move forward with the paperwork and agreements and to see if we can make this project happen.
Question, John. After construction, will this plant belong to us, or will it belong to One Water, or are we just helping the design build on this, or are we going to be responsible for maintenance and operation?
In theory, in verbal discussions right now, the option at the end, the property and the treatment plant would be owned by the OUA to own, operate, and maintain.
Are we trained to operate and maintain algae wheel, whatever the heck that is?
What's the question again?
It looks like that we're what's it called, an algae wheel? Are we trained to operate an algae wheel?
We have never had one of that particular make and model, but the operational process is similar to other wastewater treatment plant processes. So during the portion of this demonstration project, they are required to bring people in for any kind of specific training that we would need to know about that treatment plant to actually run it during this demonstration period.
Make sure we're not building a package plant for somebody else, and it's their responsibility, or is it ours afterwards? Kind of like a 46 villas or someplace like that.
A lot better than the way we got Lakeview originally, which was through the court system, like Pine Ridge Park. So the deal is that the seed money, if you will, is coming from the state for much, if not all, of the construction. And of course, the developer would require do their collection system to get it to us and to give us the property. I will not sit here right now and tell you that there is no expense by the OUA, but going into it right now, it looks like there would be minimal expense on the OUA's portion.
Your last sentence here says it is anticipated that much, if not all of the cost, would be borne by the appropriation and developer. However, that is not yet determined. How much is much, if not all?
A part of that would come to when these verbal understandings and agreements are committed to paper. I think it would be a little bit easier to understand who is doing what and why. So, yes, I do believe at this point that the developer is donating the property. Certainly, it's under our standing that the developer is doing their own collection system, and that the state appropriation would go a long way towards bearing the cost of the engineering, design, and construction.
Well, he's sitting on 500 acres, almost 600 acres, and I talked to him yesterday. I talked to him quite a bit, and he doesn't want to put septic in. He's got half-acre lots. So for him to move forward with this, he's one of the ones that's been, hey, I'll give you property. Mark Hunter said he'd give property. Everybody said they'll give property to get this done. So, but again, you've got all the cost of building the thing, and then, you got to pump those 500 homes, which the way he's laying it out, and this is the first I've seen of how they're doing the phases, but again, I spoke to him yesterday early in the morning, and he was pretty adamant on what he's going to do, and right now he's doing some stuff with DOT in Glades County, on the turn lanes, and that's kind of the holdup as we go right now.
And I've spoken to at least one Glades County commissioner who was more receptive to knowing that it would be on a package treatment plant than 80 septic tanks that close to the Rim Canal and the lake. So I believe there's people in favor of this project, but because we're getting ready to commit these ideas to writing and agreements, I just wanted to make sure that the board was fully aware of what we were working on, so that you weren't caught totally unawares when this is actually presented to you.
I'm wondering if the size is the area needed. We're looking at 5.1 acres, is that sufficient? I don't know.
To put it in perspective, I think the present site for Okatani is a little under 2.5 acres. So 5 is probably reasonable, but what I would say is the real situation would be the method of chosen for disposal. That if we use the perk ponds again, the departmental requirements, I think, are that you have to have a clear zone upwards of 100 feet outside the wetted perimeter of the ponds. So it really comes down to how big are the disposal fields, and that we have at least a 100-foot buffer outside that wetted area. So 5.1 acres probably is not unreasonable, but I can tell you from the standpoint of talking, the couple of discussions I've had with the design engineer and the developer, they haven't said that it's only 2 acres or 10 acres that they're giving us. I think that's open for discussion at this point.
Steve asked a very good question. Are these homes or mobile homes?
I believe the way they're talking to me that these are site-built homes, but I do not know that for fact. I think I do remember a comment made by one of them that the RV park has dropped by the wayside, which leads me to believe that these are all going to be, if they're not mobile homes, they're certainly going to be site-built homes.
Yeah, the lots on the Rim Canal are already pricing at about $100,000 a piece, so I don't see anybody putting a house trailer on that.
So the answer to your question is I don't know that somebody's told me that they're all site-built homes. The only thing I do know was the RV lot area, I think, that was proposed has dropped by the wayside. And I would concur, if a lot price is $100,000, I don't know that they'd put a mobile home, although look at Silver Palms.
It would definitely seem to be worth continuing discussion on it. It sounds like it'd be a good thing.
Primarily information until, I just didn't want to get so far down the road with proposed agreements and that y'all were totally unaware of what we were doing. So there's still a lot to be fleshed out. I believe the state is on board. I believe One Water is on board. And certainly the developer seems very interested. Glades County seems interested. So I think in that line we would continue to try to develop these memorandums of understanding or some kind of agreements between all parties to better define who's doing what. If this is to happen, which I believe we would, I know on our side we'd have to go out for an engineering proposal to bring somebody on board to do the permitting and design for this facility, putting together the project documents, and put it out to bid. Yes, sir, will do.
There's also another 500 acres laying right next door to it that's a guy's been sitting on for years.
Agenda item number 15, RUA board meetings.
This is just brought back primarily for informational purposes. You'll see in the board package the 2 agreement. Never mind, I'm getting waved off. Mr. Conley.
There are 2 actions needed on this. Both of them deal with the agreements. The agreements need to be approved and the execution ratified by the chairman.
Like you said, I stand corrected. In your board packages, you'll see the agreements from both the BOCC and the clerk of court. And I would also like to point out that this reiterates that here are the meeting dates and times and the places for the rest of the year, so that it's, from a public record standpoint, that this has been agreed to and we can advertise these meetings at a different place now, Mondays, 10 a.m. So I think there might be a third, if you would so.
All right, how you want the first one? So said. Yeah, that's 2. So, okay. So I make a motion that we accept as written the 2 agreements and authorize the ratify the execution by the chairman.
Motion, Mr. Clay.
Second.
Second, Mr. Nelson. Discussion? Being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Now you need to approve the meeting schedule. Apparently it's changed from the last time.
Primarily just the location from 100 Southwest Fifth Avenue.
I make a motion that we accept the meeting dates and the location as written.
Motion, Mr. Clay.
Second.
Second, Mr. Nelson. Discussion? Discussion, being none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Public comment. Public comment going once, twice. I just want to answer.
I don't have any new information for you. We're still not here. 46th Avenue, still, pretty close on.
You said that before. Nobody does twice every day, but that's been true. It's still there. It's still there. All right, thank you, sir. Items from the executive director.
Primarily two items. They're already been handled this past week. There was a public meeting by the Army Corps of Engineers concerning a development of a new operations manual, if you will, for Lake Okeechobee waterways. A lot of people in attendance. My only position with the Corps of Engineers, they kept asking me what the lake intake levels were, and I said, well, it's 6 feet and 0 feet, but that's not really the problem. For us, the problem is that there has been a lot of material washed into government cut, land bridges built so that Kissimmee River can't get directly to us, land bridges, vegetated breaks out in the lake that keeps water from getting to us. So you could lower the lake to 11 or 10 feet and effectively cut us off, regardless of where our intakes are. So basically, I suggested to them, as you work through this process, and they said it would be a 3 to 4 year process to get this new manual designed and up and running, that they should spend some effort on doing some kind of survey of the lake bottom in and around the area to really know what elevation they could lower the lake and still get water to us. So that being said, that's basically where the public comments from myself. Obviously, there was a lot of other public comments from concerning Kissimmee River, straightening it, putting bins back into it, spraying vegetation. There were just a lot of comments. It was very well attended. A lot of good comments about taking the politics out of a decision-making process and listening to historical perspectives as well as scientific perspectives as to where the lake level should go to. The other meeting, I was not going to stay around for. There was even more people there, and that was at the concerning the spraying of vegetation on the lake. I stayed long enough for the presentation and found out that I could make our comments, OUA comments, online, which primarily were to reiterate the current practice where they notify us 24 to 48 hours in advance of when they were going to be spraying, what they were going to be spraying. So if it was in the lake, we could switch to the rim canal, and then we could switch back to the lake several days after, a day or several days after the spraying, to minimize any intake. Again, a couple hundred people in a room, 250. I can tell you that it would be my best guess that you're going to have lots of people on both sides of the fence. Some that would say we're spraying too much, and others saying that we're not spraying enough. But it was a very well attended meeting. And again, I bugged out after the presentation and didn't stick around to hear what those comments were. So either one of those, have a considerable impact to the OUA and we will just watch them and see which way they go, and we will certainly follow through with that process. Most importantly, I would think would be this lake operation manual, whatever comes of it, and what I stress to them, don't do us any harm like they did with some of the original decision making that they made on lake levels.
Any questions or comments for John? Say thank you for attending those meetings and representing us. The one in a piece of meeting you went to, thank you very much.
Lots of people, when I looked at the tags outside, most of them were from our winter visitors who have places down here, and they had a direct impact, to that vegetation. Whether it's from can't get their boat out or you're destroying the spawning beds for our fish. I mean, they could have had on both sides.
Agenda item 19, items from the board. You will finish share the first one with us.
The latest amendment to the interlocal agreement, I can tell you I printed up there paragraph 4.18. I had a question from the city clerk passed on to me by the mayor asking us, what are we doing about this strategic planning process? I shared with them that in our annual budgeting process, there is a 5-year running total of projects that we intend to do. Near term, 1 year, some of those projects are very specific, like storage tank removal or water main replacement on 8th Avenue. But long term, looking out 2 to 3 to 5 years, there are monies allocated by the OUA for such things as water main replacement, new water mains, generators, repair to gravity sewer. The mayor seemed to think that met this requirement. I have not had any feedback yet from the county as to what they were expecting with this plan. So we will certainly pursue that with the county administrator and the BOCC to ask if our current policy, which we do in the annual budget process, extend out these things for 5 years, whether that meets this requirement as specified in the 4th Amendment. If not, more specifically, what they were looking for from the OUA board, which I understand if they're looking at it, something from the OUA board, that's going to come back on staff, to help prepare. So that's why I figured I would reach out to both the county administrator and the BOCC to see what it is that they were looking for, unless somebody else has already done that.
I mean, we're not going to have 2 agendas, or 2 plans. We've got a plan that we use, with what we're doing. Today's part of our plan, and going forward. And I can't see us having to do something different. Maybe get a little more, I don't know how we can get more detailed than what we are on how we're spending our money and our plans out forecasted forward. Do y'all?
I know the county hires a consultant that comes in every few years and basically works with staff, with the BOCC. They hold workshops to come up with this comprehensive strategic plan. Whether or not it works or I don't know. But again, I would certainly ask the county as to what their intent was in adding this into the 4th Amendment.
Tommy and I sat on this, Mr. Clay and I sat on this interlocal agreement subcommittee last year when they revamped and made these amendments. And my notes and everything don't indicate exactly this is what they wanted. They wanted a 3-year revolving plan, a rotating plan, and I kept telling them that we have every year we do a new budget. It's a living document. It goes every year, and I was under the impression they said that would be fine. Just send us a copy every year on what you're doing, and that would suffice for this. Also, as far as the county and city appointed members coming to meet with them, that was quarterly on what we were doing. Nothing to do with the strategic plans or anything, just to give them an update. So the amendment came out a little bit different than what my notes indicated from that subcommittee, but now that it's in writing, we have a better map on what we're supposed to do.
So would you like me to pursue this, or as the board members, do you want to reach out to the council and the commission and then get back with me as to what you would like me to do?
It was my understanding that if we sent them our, every year, our budget, our projects, and that would suffice. That's all they needed to know.
We send them copies of our budget every year. I think we might send them a draft, but I know once it's been finalized and adopted, a copy of that is sent to the commission or the council.
I think that's fine, unless they're squeaking that they're not getting what they want. You know, we're complying with what they told us at that meeting. And again, I've met with the city council and the county commission 2 or 3 times this year to bring them up to speed on what we're doing. So I think we've covered the bases pretty much, but I wouldn't worry about it, and give Lane what she's looking for. Give her a copy of that annual agreement.
Okay. Well, again, I didn't talk to Lane directly. It was a forwarded email by the mayor, and the mayor was comfortable with the data that I'm not speaking for him, but the gist of the conversation was that the 5-year plan that we had in the budget was acceptable for them.
Excuse me, wasn't there some problem that was addressed that we were giving the budget, but it wasn't given to the councilman?
Oh, that was brought up, and I think we pointed out that we had made the distribution to both the county administrator and the city administrator as far as getting the information to the city. Now, whether or not the administrators passed it on, yes, we heard about that, and they were aware that it was in their offices. Yes, ma'am.
You're absolutely right. I remember that. And they were getting it, and then some of the commissioners and the councilmen said they hadn't seen it, but it was landing in their offices is where it was landing.
With the city, I was meeting on a quarterly, sometimes a monthly basis, and there just didn't seem to be any interest, and that kind of surprised me.
Purchase of board laptops, I asked you to look into that, you have for us.
Well, we've looked at several different types, and they're available. The fees there, the outright purchase cost, as well as the ongoing cost every year or month, depending upon virus protection, software purchases, email addresses to be able to email the packages to you. It's just up for discussion whether one or more of the board members wanted a laptop to use instead of the 3-ring binder, or however, I would only caution you that being that these are a public item, that whatever is on these laptops is subject to public access. So we'll present that. If one or more of the board members wish to have their board packages delivered electronically, PDF format that they could put on their machines, here's the cost.
And again, we would get a separate email address, right?
tclay@ouafl.com. And of course, if that was set up, then that would be posted, and not only would you be able to get emails, like if we wanted to, if we could email the board package to you, or in communications between OUA staff and board members. I mean, it would be out there.
But on a separate one, so you're not going into Tommy Clay at Yahoo.
Say that again, please, publicly, sir. The benefit of it is if you have an OUA address, again, under public disclosure. All of that information is readily available should there ever need to be a rise, and that's where we would find that information. So yes, sir, it would be under a OUA address.
That would also make it easier for us to go back to look at previous meetings by going ahead setting up separate files for each meeting. So therefore, if we wanted to go back 2 or 3 meetings if something was discussed, rather than coming in with a stack of paperwork, on the notebook we'd have all the necessary information.
Yes, sir, and certainly if you were so inclined to write notes up on anything, that would be there also.
So what are we looking for?
Just a motion to approve for 9.
I make a motion that we purchase board laptops. It's 9 Asus Vivio notebook in the amount of $3,051. I make a motion that we go ahead and approve that.
Motion by Mr. Clay to purchase.
That would be inclusive of the email addresses, software, and virus protection.
So said.
Second.
Second by Mr. Nelson. Discussion?
I would only offer up one other comment. We could buy 9 if everybody was using them, or if somebody was so inclined to still get notebooks, we didn't have to buy the 9, but clearly we could do that.
John, may I make a suggestion that we include some type of case to carry the notebook?
Motion and a second. Any further discussion?
I just have a question. The 3051, does that include the email address and software?
No, but he come back and said,
It-
That's just the hardware.
sorry, that's just the hardware.
Just the hardware.
Then John come back and said what it needed to have included, and I said so said. So is that 2 motions or is that 1?
Well, I think for clarification, you're saying that you're recommending, or your motion is purchase the hardware plus the email address and the appropriate software and antivirus.
Yes.
I don't know if that's 3051 or what that number actually is.
No, 3051 plus the $499 a month plus the $129 each for software and $20 each year for the antivirus.
Okay.
That's my motion.
The numbers that I crunched real quick here are $547.88 each initially. That's with everything on the package except the case. Now, every year, it's just going to be the $499 plus the $20 a year antivirus after that. So, any further discussion? Being none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed?